chance to speak with TJ since the concussion. He's a young player, first time going through it.
Yeah.
How has he handled it? How's he holding out?
He's been really great. I think with all rookies, and he's a young player, you always try to tread those waters and really learn about the guy. I think the college mentality may be a little bit different because there are so many guys and they just kind of, go back out there. For us, as we get towards those active rosters, those 46 guys, there's a lot of conversations that need to go on because it affects other positions and things like that. So, when you're learning about young players and injuries and how they handle them, and especially with the concussion because it's so kind of unpredictable from that standpoint, you really try to just be observant, be aware, see if there's anything different. And I think just my own personal experiences with those things as you go through and you deal with players or when you're playing or whether you're coaching, you're just trying to look for small subtleties. There might be situations where guy looks good, he feels okay and all that stuff, but maybe you as a coach or you as a friend or you as a teammate start to see something that maybe just a little bit different. So you just try to be really aware. We're always trying to do what's best for the player and keep everybody protected. And, thankfully we have a great protocol that I think all the teams are using really well right now to kind of keep a gauge on that stuff, but you just want to make sure they're okay. And then, the other part that's unpredictable is that sometimes things may be fine, and then they may come up like 2 or 3 days later. It's just so kind of uncharted territory. So for a guy like TJ, to kind of go back to the question, is just really just trying to be observant with him as we learn him, as a young guy. But he's been, he loves football. He's all in on football. He's just one of those kids that just absolutely loves it. You appreciate that. And sometimes with those guys, you got to really, sometimes they're young guys, sometimes they're older guys. You got to almost protect them from themselves at some point, and just make sure that they're okay, because that's the most important thing.
If anybody was in the concussion protocol, was there like a day of game recheck just to make sure once they?
No, I think once the doctors finally get through it, maybe we're a little bit extra cautious as coaches. I think it's always a good philosophy of ours, even in game. To be honest with you, there's all the protocols and all that stuff, but even in game, if something happens, I'll always make sure, like as a coach, you go grab your player or as a head coach and ask them something relevant to the game plan, something from the week that we practiced, something that, is going to be a little bit more advanced than maybe what a general question would be to a particular guy. So for me, I think that's really important. I think it's, I've had situations before in the past where, guys like, hey, I think he's okay. And then I talk to him like, I don't think this guy's okay. And I'm not, I'm going to put somebody else in there just because, you're trying to protect those guys. You're trying to protect them, like I said, sometimes from themselves.
You talked about it last week, but did you address the hurdling thing again this week, or go over that with the guys?
I think they got a pretty good point of that last week. In general, we'll see. We'll see when the game hits. Sometimes those guys are, they're trying to do the right things. I think we all understand the dangers with some of that stuff. I do understand their point of it too, with some of the lower body risk situations that they're in right now currently, and they're trying to protect themselves from that too. So I do understand all that, and I'm not out there playing, so I'm not in that situation. I can't really do that. But I think we just, again, continual education of understanding the injuries and the risks and all that stuff is what's really most important, whatever it is. And in that particular case, I think we saw, they saw that last week.
So how do you go about teaching something like that? Are you putting up like
when to, when not to, and stuff like that? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of examples of it, through the course of a weekend and in the NFL, and even in college too. If you can grab some of that film and track that, and just try to show them, like, hey, if you're setting something up and you think you see this, then it's a calculated risk. At that point is really good. I think some of the last minute decisions on those where you're kind of reactionary are definitely is your body protecting itself. So you'll see some of that sometimes. I think understanding where you are, if you're inside, if you're outside, grass versus turf is different. I think also, situations certainly where, sometimes you got to learn how to fall. It's kind of sounds silly, but sometimes that's what you got to do. You got to learn how to protect yourself as you go down. So real hard to kind of pinpoint it and give them a concrete, like, this is the answer, because it's not. Everything is reactionary from that standpoint. Everybody's a little bit different, but there are a lot of low shots where those guys are trying to protect themselves on some of that stuff. And certainly for me, from my standpoint, as a head coach, I'm trying to also coach the other side of it. This is why we don't want to do that. This is why we don't want to go low. The heads are down here. Like, we got to keep the heads up. We got to see what we hit. We got to be protected. We want to be, in a safe hitting position on the football field. So I think it's, for us, a way to coach, and we're always trying to coach safety. Those examples are you can really identify both sides of it and really coach it hard just to get them to understand why you don't want to do this or why this position is dangerous. And that's the most important thing because, again, like I said, injuries are never good, but as a coach, when you got to walk out on that field and try to see what's going on, that's no one wants to be there.
When you've got 12 straight games, you talk a little bit about this last week, but when you've got 12 straight,
Yeah.
do you start to maybe manage practice differently and manage certain guys differently if they maybe have a slight injury versus a bigger one? Like, do you handle that differently because of the earlier body?
I think as a head coach, I definitely try to take a look at that overall structure of everything as we go forward. Sometimes the position coaches, and I was in the same situation, you're just trying to coach and get going. So what I'll try to do, and you do a little bit before the season, the same thing like we did in training camp. Like we kind of marked some areas in training camp where I thought I could give guys rest. The bye week, it was kind of interesting how it fell this year with the first 4 games. So we look at the season in quarters, just kind of how you look at it. It's easy that way. And then so we're going to look at the next 4 games, the next quarter of the season. The interesting part of it for us, which is awesome and wonderful, is that we also know we have the Thanksgiving, Thursday. So we try to target, another date in there where potentially we could get some extra rest. And then also knowing that, again, a little bit different with the Monday night game and then the Thursday game, what those weeks of practice are going to look like, from a structure standpoint, a stress standpoint. Mentally, they're going to be very taxing, but obviously physically we need to recover and get ready for the next week coming off a Monday night game or, getting ready for a Thursday game. So there are kind of a couple little breaks in there physically that we can kind of count on. I think in general, if guys are dinged up or, again, because they're playing an NFL football season right now, they're going to have some of those injuries. You try to monitor it more on an individual basis and also maybe even by a team, period, individual, just, you can do it segmented by practice. So like portions in practice, hey, this is really good. Let's pull off here. Let's go back there and kind of just make sure that they're getting the looks they need to see.
Digging into some of your special team stats yesterday, just looking at Jalen Reed's maybe number. One of the things I noticed is you guys have had more kickoffs brought back against you than any team in the NFL. I'm just wondering, we know San Martin's got the ability to boom it back consistently. Have you guys found maybe a sweet spot with your coverage where you're going to determine week to week, I guess, for return man, but where you're comfortable and confident in trying to force guys to return it and getting those extra couple yards of field position?
Yeah, I definitely would say, the second part of what you just said is critically important for us in those situations. If we, weigh the returner versus the rest of the situation of the game, those are sometimes things that we take a look at is when we want to either bang it through the end zone or try to, put it in a difficult situation to handle. Sometimes like, just even ball security, ball handling, things like that. If we're trying to put guys in tough situations, if we're outside, if we're inside, start of the Philly game, if you kind of, we're looking at it, the sun was really kind of a little bit of an issue too, with those situations, and some of those things factor into it. Lights sometimes can factor into it. So you try to, put all that in there. And I think for us, we just maintain the mentality of practicing our coverage units and making sure we're ready to go. And we've certainly seen teams this year where even if you're trying to bang it through the end zone, those guys are grabbing them, deep, and they're trying to bring them out, and so we just always have to be ready for that. And if we feel comfortable that that's part of the game that will be good for us, then we'll try to do that. Good. All right, great. Appreciate it. Thanks.